Let's talk about a YouTuber, Dave Cullen, also known as Computing Forever. Not for any reason of malice, drama, or disagreement, but because he's a useful case study. Links to the video being discussed are in the box below. However, before getting into that topic, we need to talk about the Wu flu. Good old Corona-chan. There is a lot of conflicting information regarding this virus. This is because there are multiple research labs all around the world, all looking at it in lots of different ways. All of these different labs may very well be working on different strains of this particular virus. As we've covered earlier on this channel, there is a large family tree of viruses, of which this latest COVID-19 is but one strain. As a result of this, some of these different places may very well be working on some of these other strains. This may, of course, give people different bits of information to work from. There is also a bit of a rush to get information about this disease out into the public as much as possible. This is because, of course, governments and health workers all around the world want as much information as possible so that they can make informed decisions about how to handle this disease. There's also the possibility for a little bit of academic ego getting in here. Researchers do quite enjoy being the researcher or a named researcher who came up with the thing that some government or some other organization used to defeat the virus. Being that person or part of that team will carry a certain level of prestige with it. This will, of course, contribute to the rush getting some of this information out first. There's also conflicting information regarding the use of other retroviral and/or antiviral drugs and maybe other antimicrobials, or the use of viricides, looking for treatments and off-label usages to deal with COVID-19. This is, of course, why there have been reports of HIV or AIDS medication being given to people to see if it would have any impact. Lots of drugs have uses against diseases for which they were not created to be targeted. Indeed, off-label usage of drugs is so common that it's been estimated that anything up to 50% of all prescriptions is for off-label usage. In short, there's lots of reasons why there is conflicting information, and yet most of it being seemingly correct, depending on which institute's work you read and which doctors of virology, immunology, and infectious disease, or any other specialization related to Wu flu you ask. This is the main point of this video. Dave Cullen is one example of a trend of dangerous censorship that YouTube and Facebook are engaging in. YouTube and Facebook once again acting as publishers and not platforms. Cullen had a video interview on his channel with Professor Dolores Cahill. This interview was touted as debunking the narrative around Corona. In reality, it was a fairly middling interview in which a professor explained that given the low rates of death and seemingly higher numbers of asymptomatic carriers, her hypothesis is that the extensive lockdowns being used may be counterproductive, likening the virus to other diseases such as chickenpox. It comes in waves. We allow people to get it because it's fairly harmless, although some people do get major symptoms and require hospital treatment, but in the end there is a wide-scale immunity derived from this action, and everyone goes about their lives as normal. There's also some evidence that staying indoors for extended periods of time and not being exposed to regular outdoor pathogens can weaken the immune system overall, meaning that once lockdown ends, more people will get sick of anything and everything as a result of an untrained immune system. Also, there is a certain percentage of people who will have immunities anyway, and there are some people who won't have antibodies for a variety of reasons. Now, to give context, Professor Cahill is not some crackpot tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy theorist that was found under a rock somewhere. A quick perusal of Professor Cahill's Google Scholar profile reveals dozens of peer-reviewed published papers, many of them with citations in the hundreds, with lifetime citations in the thousands, which is in itself impressive. I remind you that several of the so-called scholars I've reviewed on this channel publishing in fields such as gender studies, women's studies, pornography studies, and feminism often have their papers cited by no one, ever, with lifetime citation counts in the tens. Professor Dolores Calhill has a degree in molecular genetics, and her PhD is in immunology, where she was using antibodies and making libraries to try and improve the outcomes in cancer patients. She also spent 8 years in the Max Planck Institute for Molecular Genetics in Berlin, where she led a group and developed technology that could look at the specificity of antibodies and different diagnostic assays to diagnose autoimmune diseases, and for example with viruses and patients, look at whether they have actually been exposed to a virus or not. In the 90s, she was part of a team that looked at published antibodies and found that a lot of what was published was not necessarily correct. They were involved in correcting a lot of published research. Her research at the time was quite disruptive. However, she quickly gained awards from the German Minister for Science, and then was on the German Advisory Science Council, advising funding agencies such as the BAE and AF, and still does this 20 years later. She is also on the Advisory Science Council in Ireland for the Strategy for Science, Technology and Innovation. She was nominated to represent Ireland on the Scientific Committee for the Innovative Medicines Initiative in the European Union, and since 2016 became vice chair. She was also involved in developing the meningitis B vaccine for Africa. She also worked in a Class 4 biolab, which is the highest tier of biosafety level. In other words, the most dangerous and difficult level to work in. She has been working most recently with a doctor who is advising the White House in the US on protocols for prevention and treatment, such as the use of hydroxychloroquine. As you can see, a very impressive resume indeed. And while appeals to authority are not 100% sound arguments in themselves, it becomes difficult to hand-wave someone with such excellent credentials as just being someone who is uninformed or uneducated on the topic. Now, this is not to say that Professor Calhill is correct, or incorrect. As stated, you can find different experts in the field who hold different positions on the topic because they have different interpretations of the data. The important thing is that there is active discussion within the field, different hypotheses posited and tested so that the best outcomes can be found. This is not what is happening with regards to this interview video, which YouTube removed from their site, citing the reason that it somehow violated their community guidelines after being reported. The reporting of this video is also a point of interest. Cullen was contacted by a so-called journalist, more accurately activist, Martin Coulter, working for the Business Insider, asking for comments about his video being taken down. A quick perusal of Martin Coulter's Twitter feed reveals that he himself is bragging about having flagged the video in question. Coulter then went on to write a hit-piece article libeling both Cullen and Cahill as being hard-right conspiracy theorists peddling misinformation. Indeed, to quote the title of Coulter's, Facebook and YouTube took 7 days to remove an hour-long video filled with COVID-19 conspiracies, really putting the emphasis on the time frame to try to make it sound as though the mere existence of an expert's opinion challenging the so-called conventional wisdom mainstream narrative on the topic is somehow doing some widespread damage to society. In reality, the existence of this interview is merely a sign of what is supposed to happen within the field of science. Different interpretations of the same data leading to different hypotheses, leading to further testing and more accurate data, and round the cycle goes. Science becoming, hypothetically at least, an ever-sharpening blade. This is a massive conflict of interest on the part of the Business Insider and their activist blogger who is reporting on news that they themselves are creating. This reminds me of times when other activist bloggers masquerading as journalists have uploaded Nazi content to various Chan boards so that they can screen cap it and share it in order to attack the site. Which also reminds me of a time a certain bread tuber downloaded what he considered to be indecent content involving underage children, only to then upload it to a Chan board and screen cap it as a means of attacking the site. The part that makes this even worse than the already disgusting display of duplicity that it is that the Business Insider has the gall to then paywall the hit piece that was written about Cullen and Professor Cahill. So we have an activist blogger writing about the news he himself created and profiting off of it. I've made no bones about my dislike of YouTubers engaging in shit-flinging on social media and then making monetized videos about said shit-flinging, but ultimately, that is private people engaging in online slap fights and uploading monetized content about those slap fights on their own private YouTube channels. I find it somewhat disgraceful behavior, but they are within their rights to do this. However, for a so-called journalist to engage in this for-profit activist behavior is beyond the pale, and frankly Martin Coulter should be ousted from his job and blacklisted from the industry for this display of unethical behavior. But of course, that will more than likely not happen, because the career of journalist is dead these days, replaced by written activism and clickbait nonsense. It should be noted, this is not the first time, nor will it be the last time social media sites engage in censoring the voices of experts in the field because they don't toe a certain narrative. Have there been conspiracy theories based on coronavirus? Sure. Have people got things wrong? Absolutely. These things almost always happen and probably always will. Omniscience is not a skill that any human possesses. However, this is not an excuse to engage in the censorship of ideas and new hypotheses. The novel virus is just that. Novel. It is new. It is unprecedented. We are still not 100% sure what to do about this. Hence, different places are deploying different strategies. Lockdowns, quarantines, limited movement, or in some cases, nothing at all, and everything else besides. What needs to happen is for lively debate and inquiry to flourish, so that governments, healthcare workers, and citizens can make as informed decisions as possible moving forward with as much data as possible to aid in that process. And yes, that includes the use of pieces of data which may be contradictory to each other.